All right, how many of us have ever made a New Year's resolution before? Anybody? I want to see some hands. Yeah, raise those shameful hands in the air. Yeah, you know, we say, okay, it's a new year. I'm going to start over. I'm going to do that thing that I know I've needed to do for years. I'm going to make it happen. This is the time, right? Anybody? Yeah, sure. You know, and it's kind of a tradition. It's an American thing. New Year's resolution, let's start over. And we usually get a little bit overzealous. We say, okay, I'm going to work out. Well, not just work out. I'm going to work out 7 days a week, 2 hours a day. And then we go in there for our first session. We work out for 2 hours. And you're like, yeah, this isn't for me. Maybe next year. We say, you know what? I'm going to get in shape. I'm never going to eat chocolate again. Never again. Or we'll say, I'm going to take my television. I'm going to throw it out into the street so I don't spend much time watching television. And I know about that one because Pastor Rick did that one when I was a kid. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. We never seem to really follow through, do we? We'll start these things and we'll get really zealous about them. And maybe if we're, really good at it, it'll last a couple weeks or even a month or a couple months. But 6 months later, a year later, 2, 3 years later, we've forgotten we ever even tried. What is that exactly about us that keeps us from doing the things that we want to do? Or starting them and then falling back into the old ways of doing things? The last 7 weeks, for those of you who've been with us, we've been talking about coming out of the dark. We've been talking about exposing the problems that we have in our lives to God's light, and then watching Him be able to fix those problems, fix the habits that we have in our lives, fix the hurts that we carry with us, the things that we're hung up and stuck on that mess us up. That's what we've been focusing on. It's been a series called The Road to Recovery. And we're on week 7. I think it's been an incredible experience for many of us. This whole thing is about moving forward. It's about growth. It's about making progress. And today, I want to talk to you guys about something that's extremely important for all of us to be aware of and consider when we're trying to make progress, when we're trying to grow. And it's this question: how do we actually maintain it? This is our big problem. We tend to have a good idea of what we should be doing, and maybe we'll even start a little bit. But we have a serious problem with maintaining our momentum. How do we maintain it? How do we manage to keep going in the right direction? How do we manage to not lose the progress that we do make in our Christian life? Because the fact is, when you're growing, it's not a smooth thing. We shouldn't expect it to be smooth. The road to recovery we're talking about is a jagged road. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, if you're lucky. It's not all easy. You're going to have problems. I think some of you have experienced these already. You're going to have problems. You're going to run into walls. You're going to fall back into self-defeating patterns. That's called a relapse. You're going to experience relapse or struggle with relapse. So what do we do about it? Because the alcoholic goes back to drinking. The workaholic fills up his schedule again. The gambler goes back to the casino. The overeater gains the weight back. How do we keep from doing that exactly? This is our tendency. We tend to repeat the patterns that we have in our past. And it's very easy to slip back up. It's very easy to slip right back in the old way of doing things, the old habits, the old hurts. So today I want to look at 2 things. I'm going to look at 2 things with you guys. Number 1, I want to look at why. Why we have such a hard time with this thing. Why we have such a hard time maintaining our forward momentum. I want to look at what exactly it is that causes us to slip back. And number 2, I want to look at the actual maintenance step itself. Step 7 in this 8-step process called the Road to Recovery. How to maintain our momentum. How to avoid a relapse. So first, let's look at the question of the hour here. Why do we fall back? Why, even when we know the right way to go? Like we are confident that we should be doing this particular thing. I know I need to do this. I'm going to start doing it. Why do we tend to go back on what we know is right? What causes relapse? And this morning, I want to look at 4 major things that can cause relapse in our lives when we're trying to move forward. Whether it's in this particular program, the Road to Recovery, or whether we're making a resolution or trying to change our lives on our own, whatever it is. 4 things that can cause a relapse. And here's number 1. Number 1 is reverting to willpower. reverting to willpower, because the whole process, what we've been talking about in the road to recovery, it starts off with relying on God for the recovery. That's step one, if you guys remember. Step one is that we cannot handle this on our own. We don't have the strength. We don't have the willpower to take care of it all, to fix all of our own problems. Step two is understanding that God does have that power. He does have the capability to help us change. And step three is giving our lives over to God to let him change them. And so, we do that. We're going in the road to recovery, and we start like this, and we let God make those changes in our lives, and things start going better, things start going well, and you have some successes, and you start winning a little bit, and things are going well, and after a little while, you start thinking, I'm pretty good. I'm doing it. I'm finally making it happen. Man, you know what? It's me. I'm doing this thing. I'm making the changes happen. And we resort to good old willpower again. There's a very strong tendency, and whether it's a cultural thing or whether it's just a human thing, we have a tendency to, willpower is it, man. You got to get it done yourself. If you want something done right, you do it yourself. And we've talked about this again and again in this series, but willpower simply does not cut it. It doesn't. It's been proven over and over and over and over again. It doesn't cut it. Because we have a few successes, and suddenly we start thinking that we're all that we've got it all. We can handle anything that life could possibly throw at us. We're the Omega. We are all powerful. We are all knowing. We've got it all under control. And I think sometimes we really need to be reminded that we're not. We're not all that. We don't have it all under control. I heard a story once about a lady who went into a fortune teller's shop somewhere in New York City, and she was greeted at the front by a receptionist type lady. She said, have you come to see the great Barzini, the all-powerful, the all-knowing, the transcendent, the eternal Barzini? And the lady said, yeah, could you tell Greg I brought his lunch? It's his mother calling. And I think sometimes we got to be reminded that we're not all that, that we're not the all-powerful, we're not the all-knowing. We don't have it all under control, because we really don't. Even when we think we do, something goes wrong at the drop of a pin, and that's it. Life's all falling apart because we don't have it all under control. And God will sometimes do that for us. Sometimes he's willing to remind us that we do not have it all under control, that we're not all that. He's willing to actually let us relapse again and again until we get it through our heads that we can't do it on our own. He is. He's willing to let us fall over and over again until we say, God, I can't do it. In the Bible, in Zechariah chapter 4, God says, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit. You will succeed because of my Spirit. And the simple fact is that only God has the power to help us overcome this stuff. If you revert and resort to your own willpower, you're going to relapse. So that's number one, reverting to willpower. Number two is ignoring one of the steps of the process of recovery. Ignoring one of the steps. And I know we're in a hurry. We Americans, we got to get this stuff done. We got to get stuff done fast. We got to go fast. We got to move. We got to take care of this thing. We got to fix our problems. And so we say, I'll skim through a couple of these. I'll skip to the end. We like to have our instant gratification. Or maybe you want to skip out on one of the tough ones. You're like, okay, well, let's see. I'll do 1, 2, and 3. 4 is kind of not really in my comfort zone. So I'll skip to 5, and maybe I'll just do half of 6 because I don't really want to go there. We'll say, I don't really need that step from last week about making amends with people who've hurt me. Or we'll say, maybe, it's okay. I'll skip this one. I'll just have partial recovery. It won't be complete. I'll just get some of the benefit. I'll say, I haven't, the people I've hurt in the past, it wasn't that bad. I don't think I need to go to them and ask for forgiveness. Quit it. Quit that. You need to do all the steps or it's not going to work. Because the fact is there's no quick fix for the problems you've gotten yourself into. You didn't get yourself into them overnight, and they're not going to be fixed easily. Do all the steps, please. Whatever kind of recovery program you're going through, whether it's this one or another one, quit skipping. Go back to the basics. So that's number 2, ignoring one of the steps. Number 3, trying to recover without support. Trying to recover without support. And we do this. We say, oh, you know what, I'll just get well by myself. I'm going to take care of it on my own. And, I don't really need to get anyone else involved. I'll do this on my own. And you're just asking for a relapse when you hit that point, when you start telling yourself that. We say, oh, okay, I'll listen to the messages. Sure, I'll go on Sunday morning. I'll hear the messages. I'll hear the steps, and I'll do them on my own. But I'm not going to go to any kind of counseling. It's a little bit too far for me. Or I'm not going to go to a Celebrate Recovery meeting. Or I'm not going to go to a small group. I don't really want to involve anyone in my issues. I'll just do it on my own. No, you won't, because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 in the Bible says, 2 are better than 1. If one falls, the other can reach out and help. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, and when there is not another to lift him up. You can't beat that thing alone. Whatever you're struggling with, you can't beat it alone. If you could, you would have already, because I know you've tried. And I think maybe perhaps the renowned theologian and philosopher Bill Withers said it best when he said, we all need somebody to lean on. Because we do. No man is an island. We weren't created to be independent and mighty on our own. We were created to be attached in relationship with other people, to be supported by our God and by the people around us. We were. And sure, look, you can do these steps on your own. You could. And you will see short-term benefit. You will see some short-term effects, but you can't do long-term recovery without relational support. It doesn't work. It may work for a while, but it's not going to work for long. You're going to fall back. It's like getting on the highway and driving your car, and you're going 70 miles an hour, and you just take your hands off the steering wheel. You're maybe going to stay on the road for a little while, maybe well for a little bit, but the moment the road gets curvy again, you're inevitably going to fall off the road and crash. That's how it is. Because if you don't get support, who exactly is going to help you up when you fall? I don't care what you think. You will stumble and fall at one point or another. If there's no one there to support you, who is going to pick you up when you don't feel like doing it anymore? When you want to quit? When you don't want to do what's right anymore? So again, no man is an island. So that's number 3, trying to recover without support. And lastly, here's number 4, the number 4 reason why we fall back, why we relapse. We become prideful. We become prideful. We get overconfident, we get full of pride, and we say, I am strong. I am strong. I've got this thing beat. You know what? I've closed that door. I've moved on. It's not a problem for me anymore. I'll never struggle with it again. I've beaten it. We have to be very, very careful when those kind of thoughts float around in our head, because the Bible is clear that in Proverbs chapter 16, pride goes directly before destruction. So we need to stay humble or we're going to trip up. Inevitably, we're going to trip up if we don't stay humble. Because that's what pride does. It sets us up for a fall. It sets us up to trip. It blinds us to our weaknesses. It fills us up with ourselves and keeps us from following all the steps fully, from making amends to other people or asking for forgiveness. Or it'll defer the blame and keep you from even starting the process. That's what pride says. It's not me. It's not really my fault. I'm just a victim of my environment. It's them. It's all those other people. Because pride pushes the responsibility off on someone else. It was like the story of a guy I heard who went to a psychiatrist, said, hey, my friend referred me to you. He thinks I have a problem. Could you evaluate me? The psychiatrist said, sure, look, I'm going to look at a series of images, and I want you to tell me the first thing that pops into your head so I can give you an evaluation. And he held up a picture of a circle. The guy said, oh, I see a deep dish 4-cheese meat lover's pizza. The psychiatrist said, okay, and he held up a picture of a square. He said, what do you see? He said, I see a 7-layer club sandwich with turkey, ham, bacon, lettuce, tomato, Swiss. The psychiatrist says, okay, and he holds a picture of a triangle. He says, what do you see? And he says, I see a triple scoop, double dark chocolate ice cream cone. The psychiatrist says, okay, we can quit here. I know what your problem is. You're obsessed with eating. And the guy says, hey, you're the one showing me all the pictures of food. It's not my fault. But this is what pride does. It defers the blame. It's always someone else's fault. It pushes it off on somebody else. And so the secret of actually having recovery that lasts is to stay humble. It's to stay humble. It's the best protection from a relapse. It's not getting prideful, not saying, I've got it all together. I'll never struggle with that thing again. I'll never fall back. It couldn't happen to me. We need to realize, look, we are getting it together. We're in the process of getting it together, but we don't have it all together. We do not have it all together. We're getting there. And we live in a constant state of humility, understanding that we've still got a lot of work to do. I don't care where you are, you still got a lot of work to do. I guarantee it. And that's the best protection. Some years ago, before the Soviet Union broke up, some of you will recognize this story. There was a German teenage boy who flew a private plane into Soviet airspace and landed it in front of the Kremlin in the Red Square. Now, this at the time was the most heavily protected airspace in the world. And a teenage boy flew into it and just landed there. And I think there's a very important lesson to be learned there. Sometimes your greatest weakness is an unguarded strength. What I mean by that is this. We say, you know what, I'm good. I've got it all together. Watch out. We say, my marriage is strong. We would never fall apart. Watch out.
That's right.
We say, you know what, I'm pretty good at this thing. I would never get addicted to anything. You watch out. Because very often the very area you think that you are strongest in, you leave unguarded. And that's the exact spot where some teenage kid is going to fly a plane and land right in the middle of it. If you understand my analogy. Not literal, no. So that's number 4. We become prideful. Number 4, we become prideful. And so those are at least 4 major reasons that we relapse. 4 major things that cause us to fall backwards. But how do we actually avoid that in the first place? What can we do on a daily basis to maintain the momentum of our process of recovery? To continue moving forward in the things we've talked about the last few weeks. So here's big step number 7, the maintenance step. And we've had this device with the word recovery, where every letter stands for another step. And here's the R, right at the end of recovery. R stands for reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and to know His will for your life and to gain the power to do it. To reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer. And this is all based on what Jesus said in Mark chapter 14. He said, watch and pray so that you do not fall into temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. In other words, I know in your head you want to do what's right, but you have a tendency to fall, my friend. So watch and pray that you don't let it happen. And Christ is telling us here that that's our tendency. It's our tendency to relapse. It's our tendency to go back to the things that mess us up even though we know that they are not good for us. It's our tendency to let those past problems revisit us, to let the old hurts or the old habits come right back into our lives. And so Christ tells us we've got to have some safeguards. You put up some safeguards, and that's what this step is all about. Setting up safeguards against relapse. So there are 3 safeguards I want to talk about this morning before we wrap up here. 3 things that can help us maintain our recovery process on a daily basis. You guys ready? Okay. Here's number 1. Evaluation. Evaluation. Because in 2 Corinthians chapter 13 it says, check up on yourselves. Check up on yourselves. In Lamentations chapter 3 it says, let us examine ourselves and return to God. So we're supposed to examine ourselves, but what does that mean exactly? What are we to examine? What are we to evaluate in our lives? And there are 4 kinds of inventories we should be taking of ourselves on a regular basis. 4 things we should be looking for. We're going to go over them very quickly. Number 1 is the physical. In other words, ask yourself the question, what is my body telling me? What is my body telling me? Because your body is a barometer of what's happening inside of you. And do you have tense muscles chronically? You're probably under stress. Do you have constant headaches? You having serious trouble sleeping? There's probably something going on inside of you, my friend. Your body's a barometer. It's a warning light that something is going wrong. And so periodically we need to stop and say, okay, what is my body saying to me? And take the clues that point us in the direction of the areas where we need to be looking out for, the areas we're struggling in. So number one, we need to examine ourselves physically. How are we doing physically? What's my body telling me? Number two, emotionally, we need to ask ourselves a question. What am I feeling right now? How am I doing emotionally? Am I hurting? Am I exhausted? Am I angry? Do I resent anybody? Am I anxious? Am I fearful? What are the emotions going on inside my head right now? Check on your emotions. Because more often than not, your emotions are going to point you in the exact direction of the area you have a problem with, or the area you need to be looking out for, or the area that's going to creep up on you and cause a relapse. So check up on your emotions. Number three, the relational. Ask yourself, am I at peace with everyone? This is a fun one because it'll take us like an hour to get it, to lose our peace with everyone we know. Am I at peace with everybody? And if not, the internal conflict is just going to hold you back from anything you need to be doing. We've talked about this in some depth, but having that kind of dissension in your heart with another person holds you back from moving forward. It holds you back hard. Are you preoccupied with something that somebody said or did to you? If the answer is yes, it is controlling you a whole lot more than you know. So don't let it. Be vigilant and looking at how you're doing relationally and letting it go on a consistent basis, because it's only holding you back. So that's number three, relational, and number four is spiritual. Ask yourself, am I relying on God? Moment by moment, am I relying on God? And honestly, that's a question that we all should be asking ourselves no matter where we're at in our lives. Am I relying on God moment by moment? Am I connected with Him relationally? That's number four, the spiritual. We examine the physical, we examine the emotional, the relational, and the spiritual on a regular basis. And here's one very important thing to consider in the process of evaluation. When you do like an inventory at work, like a grocery store, you don't just look at the bad fruit, do you? You count in all the good fruit as well. You take inventory of the whole thing. And so we need to understand that when we do this, when we sit down and evaluate our lives, we need to say, what is good? What is going well for me right now? Because it's very easy for us to look at all the negative things. I messed up here and here and here. You know what? I haven't done a single worthwhile thing all day today, and we get down on ourselves and it just pushes us back. Yes, it's important to be aware of how you failed, but it's also very important to be looking at the areas you succeeded in and celebrating every minor victory on a daily basis. No matter how small it is, we celebrate it. We say, you know what? I told the truth at least once today. Making progress. It's 100% more than I did yesterday. You say, okay, yeah, I blew it 3 times, but I managed to keep my calm twice. We say, you know what? At least I wanted to be unselfish in that situation. The little victories we have and counting those things is what keeps us moving forward. We celebrate those things. You evaluate yourselves. You celebrate your successes. You confess your failures, but you be grateful for what you've done that's right and the little healings God has done in you throughout the day. So that's what you evaluate. The physical, the emotional, the relational, and the spiritual. But when do you do it? How often do you need to be evaluating yourself? And I think evaluation's a lot like cleaning house, honestly. And there are a few different ways that we do this. Some of you are what I call neatniks. You are the instant cleaners. You've got the mop in your hand and the vacuum strapped to your back, and you're following the kids around, picking up their toys as soon as they drop them on the floor. Like the really annoying waiter that'll come and take your plate before you're done. You're like, how's that? I only ate half my steak. Like that. As you can tell, I'm not one of those people. The instant cleaners. Some of you are, others of you will are kind of clean up at the end of the day. You'll look at the wreckage of your home at the end of a long battle fought and say, okay, it's time to clean up. Time to recover for the next day when it will be wrecked again. You clean up at the end of the day. You pick up, you clean daily. And others of you are kind of, you'll have a specific day or a season in which you'll clean, whether you need it or not. I'm like, that's okay. It's been 9 months. Okay, time to clean up a bit. The spring cleaners that don't clean any season but spring, like, you're missing the point of spring. That's not what that means. So you really can evaluate in some of the same ways, honestly. And in some ways, there's nothing bad about doing it one way or another. Some of you need to be throughout the day, every hour, every minute, looking at yourselves and evaluating yourselves physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually, and picking up after the messes you've created for yourself. Yeah, I see some. That's me. Yeah. Yeah, I have to do that. Every little bit I have to look at myself and go, okay, I got to put myself back in order because I'm really out of sorts. And some of you, at the end of the day, will have a time where you say, okay, how am I doing after that day? How am I doing right now? And you fix yourself and put yourself back into order for the next day. And some of you will do some of those two things in combination with a particular day that you'll set aside to do nothing but figure yourself out, spending time evaluating and examining yourselves. But whatever way you need to do it, whatever way works for you, you need to be sitting down and evaluating yourself because we do not do that naturally. It is not something that's going to come easily. We like to be busy. We like to move. We don't like to sit and be alone with our heads for more than a couple seconds at a time because it's kind of scary. You don't want to look at the mess. You need to be evaluating yourselves. That's number one. The first way we maintain our recovery, examining ourselves regularly. Here's number two, meditation. And I know, meditation, meditate, become one with the universe. No, that's not what I'm saying. It sounds funny today because meditation's kind of been shanghaied by a lot of other people, but the concept itself is a really good biblical thing. And it simply means this: slowing down long enough to hear God. Slowing down long enough to let God speak. That's all we mean here. And this is very, very true. Busyness, it stifles growth. It stifles progress. It stifles moving forward. It stifles relationship with God. And we sure love to get busy. Once again, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or just a human thing, but we really love to just keep moving and never stop. And so the secret really of spiritual strength, the secret of being able to move forward and stay moving forward is making sure that you set time aside to be alone with God. Quiet time is another way this is referred to. In Psalm chapter 1, right at the beginning of the book of Psalms, it says this: "Happy are those who are always meditating on God's laws and thinking about ways to follow him closely. They are like trees on a river that do not dry up. They succeed in everything they do." The key to growth is to have roots deep down in relationship with God and in God's word. And the way to get roots in those things is by meditating on those things. It's as simple as that. You sit down with the Bible, you sit down with God, you take time to seriously just get rid of all the other stuff you're thinking about and all of the stuff you're doing. Spend time with your God. Spend time reading his word and seriously actually thinking about the things that you're reading and thinking about how to apply it to your own life. That's meditation. How does this apply to me? How can I apply this thing to my own daily life? That's meditation. So you root yourself in the things that God has called us to live by, and you're not going to relapse. That's it. You won't relapse if you're rooting yourself in the things that God has called us to live by. A pastor friend of mine told me a story where he was out one day and he saw a homeless man, and after a moment he recognized the guy. It was a guy who had been going to his own church recently. And he said, What happened to you? What happened to you, man? He said, "Oh, my life's fallen apart." He said, my financial situation is awful. I've lost all my income. I was fired from my job. My wife is leaving me because I have no money. My kids are messed up. I've got nothing. My life is in shambles. I have no money. I'm a disaster. And the pastor said, look, man, I know this is hard to hear. I know this seems crazy, but you take a Bible and you read that thing and you start doing what it says. And God has promised that you're going to be a success. He's so confident in this. He says, you know what? You open the Word, and you put your finger down, and you do just whatever it says, okay? And he said bye to him, and he was been praying for them, and some months passed. And he finally he saw the guy again in some store, but the guy's put together again. He's well-dressed, he's groomed, and he's doing well. And then the pastor said, what happened to you, man? I'm so glad to see you're doing better. What happened? And the guy said, Pastor, I did what you said. And he said, I did what you said. I opened the Bible, and I put my finger down, and it said chapter 11. That's bankruptcy, guys. That's the bankruptcy chapter. I figured I should really mention for those who don't get it that's bankruptcy, but I didn't expect you all to. Chapter 11 of what? Chapter 11 of which book? Which verse? I want to read the... Come on. Anyway, we're going to end right here. Look, I don't suggest that you do that, okay? It is not something I would prescribe. You do not have Pastor Nate's stamp of approval on the Bible roulette strategy. But the point is, God has very clearly made a promise in His Word. He said, if you will follow my word, you're going to succeed in life. That's it. It's very literally a manual for life, and life becomes a whole lot easier when you read the instructions. Like using anything, if you know how to use it, becomes a whole lot easier. And so that's the second way we can maintain a momentum. Spending time meditating on God, meditating on our relationship with God, and meditating on His Word. So number one, evaluate yourselves, examine yourselves. Number two, set aside time for meditating on God and relationship with Him and His Word. And lastly, as we wrap up here, number three, prayer. Number three is prayer. And prayer is simply the way that you can plug in to God's power. Because maybe you can't do it, maybe you can't handle it, but God can. And how do you get that kind of ability from Him? You ask, you request it. That's what prayer is. Prayer is requesting God's involvement in your life, His help in your life, because He respects the freedom that He's given you, and He's not going to bulldoze you over to fix you. But He'll do it if you ask Him. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we can and should pray for any need in our lives. We can and we should. We have to understand that God is a loving Father. He's maybe the Father that you never had, and He wants to help. He wants to provide. He wants to be involved. He wants you to invite Him to work in your life. And so whether it's a financial need or a physical need or an emotional need or a relational need or whatever it is, God will take it because He wants to hear it and He wants to help. And that's a very simple idea, and that's a very quick summary of the importance of prayer. But I think in some ways that's all that needs to be said. You invite your God to be involved and to help with the problems that you're facing and the things you're struggling with. Because, man, He wants to be involved. And so those are three ways that we can maintain our momentum on a daily basis, because we're going to be facing relapse. We're going to be facing things that are going to want to pull us right back into the old way of doing things. But if we're going to take time to examine ourselves, to work ourselves out inside, if we take time to meditate on God's Word, to meditate on a relationship with Him, we take time to pray to Him, if we do those things consistently, we will not fall back. And so that is how we maintain our recovery. Now, as we wrap up here, we are privileged to hear a testimony from somebody who has been through this process himself. If you would come up here.
Morning, church. Morning. Check. Lovely, lively lobster. Can you hear me? All right. First of all, I totally agree with everything that Nate's talking about, and it's great to hear the perspective of recovery from a group, another place, another preacher. Introduce myself. My name is Kenny, and I'm a child of God, a follower of Christ. And I'm here today to share my story with you about my struggles with anxiety, divorce, fear, trust issues, procrastination, and lack of faith. I've also had struggles with addiction, and I'm here to share my condensed version of this. Thank you. Growing up, I had an incredible childhood. I grew up in a faith-oriented family with lots of family devotional reading at home and plenty of involvement in the church. We were there Sundays, Saturdays, and Wednesdays. I loved my God, I had faith, and I loved my church. After moving from one parent's house to another parent's house around high school, my church attendance all but ceased. And by college, my back was completely turned on God. And this continued until quite recently. And though my beliefs were there, my faith, my praise, and my thanks were gone. I moved to Fort Lauderdale after college to pursue a less than lucrative career in professional gambling. I also served as crew on some fancy private yachts. Neither of these had anything to do with my degree from UF. But by this time, I was purely living in the moment. I had no place to call home, living on someone else's yacht, spending money as fast as I could make it. And all the while, I was quite aware that something was missing, but I didn't know what it was. After a while at sea, I rekindled an old relationship, and things went well for quite some time. Eventually, we got married, and still something was missing. I also, around that time, started longing for children in my life. When the first bundle of joy arrived, I spent less and less time devoted on my relationship at home, doting on my son all the time, as I had done my wife when we were first married. And when the second one arrived, my second child arrived, what little time was left went to him. I had everything I wanted in my life, or so I thought, and I let everybody around me who would listen know it. The burden of children, as welcome as it is, it took a toll on my relationship with my wife. She wasn't getting the attention that she wanted, and she let me know loud and clear. She wasn't happy, and I resisted counseling on the grounds that things weren't that bad. Time would heal whatever was going on, and it wasn't worth the money. She stopped trying to get my attention around this time, and she moved out and filed for divorce shortly after that. And the worst was still yet to come. You see, I had let that relationship slip away, but my kids had become my life focus. And now I was only going to be with them some of the time. And when they were away, I wouldn't even be able to reach them. And that was my absolute bottom. On the days that I would give my kids back to my co-parent, it would become a weekly realization of a parent's worst fear. And I would fall into a cycle of depression, and then later in the week, elation. In their absence, I would become lost in addiction, paralyzed, unable to function. I struggled at work, I struggled at home, and I searched my life for truth. And it was around this point I remembered my God and came crawling back to church. I started attending weekend services. It was the first of many blessings in my very recent transformation. See, after the messages, Pastor Rick Addison would mention Celebrate Recovery and how it was for anyone with any hurt, habit, or hang-up. I had something on all three of those lists, and it sounded appealing, but I still waited for months to go. And finally, I attended to support somebody else who reached out for my help. I came to Celebrate Recovery, found my small group on Tuesday nights, and I found a place to unload my hurts, habits, and hang-ups. After several months, I started an additional program that they have there called a Step Study. It transformed my life 1 week at a time. I learned to let go of past regrets. I found trust in a brotherhood of men with like issues. And I found commitment in going to meetings and finishing a step study. Some of the same burdens that I mentioned are as bad or worse. And I have often said that nothing has changed but my attitude. That victory is great in itself, but it pales in comparison to what God has planned for my life. After peeling back the layers and getting right with my past, I had a set of tools now for approaching any and all of life's obstacles, and I use them daily. One of the biggest ones that I am still going with is one I want to share with you, is that I'm progress and not perfection. Have I grown? I've grown more in the past 2 years than I have in my whole adult life. I had to change some of what I was doing. I had to give up some bad habits. I lost some friends or people I thought that were. But not who I am. You see, I am more of who I am. I have more of what God always knew me to be. Some of the stuff that I put on here are some of my recent praises and some of the struggles, like I just mentioned, progress, not perfection. I started coaching youth soccer at the YMCA, and that led me to want to go back to school. I've since finished my teacher certification program, and I start teaching tomorrow at Murray Middle School. Thank you. I was co-facilitating a youth group at the Celebrate Recovery at Grace Place, and have since then launched the Landings, which is a middle school version of the Celebrate Recovery program. And physically, I finished some obstacle course races and a couple endurance races. Those physical accomplishments are a reminder to keep my excuse level low and push my way to my goal to be the best. My name is Kenny, and thanks for letting me share.
And I think the thing that we have to remember is that we're not in a sprint when it comes to recovery, we're in a marathon. And so maintaining your forward momentum is so incredibly crucial because, as Kenny just said, he's not overnight recovered, he's not fixed, but he's in the process every single day of moving forward. We have to maintain our momentum. So we're going to have the band come up here and play a song as we begin to wrap up here. And we're going to have some of our leaders come up here at the front as well. But if this is something that you're hearing, if you are here for the first week, or if you've been here for a couple weeks and just now you're kind of been stirred towards action, I would encourage you to pick this process up. If you've been looking at your life and you're sick of how it's going, I would encourage you to pick up the process of recovery. And the very first step is to realize that you cannot do it on your own, but that with the help of your God and your Creator, you can do it. We're going to have some of our leaders come up here at the front. And if you want prayer for anything at all, whether you're in the process of recovery, or whether you're considering it for the first time, or whether you're just now accepting Christ into your heart, we'd love to be able to pray for you.